Welcome, students, to English Review with Professor Glenda Carrion. Today we're going to work on simple past tense. And what is simple past tense? The simple past tense is used to talk about a complete action in a time before now. The simple past is the basic form of the past tense in English. The time of the action can be in the recent past or in the distant past, and action duration is not important. So it's simply an event that was in the past and it's gone, it's finished. Okay? El pasado simple es un pasado, está hablando de algo que ocurrió en el pasado, no importa cuánto duró, pero ya esa acción se terminó. Okay? Okay, there are two ways to work with the simple past. And there are two ways because there are two types of verbs. There are the regular verbs and there are the irregular verbs. I'm sure you have heard of this before. So let's look at the examples. John Cabot sailed to America in 1498. That is a regular verb. How do you know that a verb is regular? Well, you know that it's regular because it ends with ed. The present form of the verb would not have the ed, would be sail. When in past tense you add the ed or a d at the end of the verb, that makes it regular. And those are a lot of verbs in English, but not all of them, right? So look at the difference when I am using an irregular verb. My father went to Europe last year. Went is an irregular verb. I'm going to use the color blue to talk about the irregular verbs. The present tense of the word went is go. That would be the verb in present. Look at how different it changes from go to went in the past tense. That is what makes went or go an irregular verb, because there is no pattern. There is no rule, a specific rule that tells you how the verb is going to change. It's simply something that you have to learn by memory and by practicing, right? But the good news is that you only have to use the regular verb or the regular verb form when you are talking in affirmative or positive. If you are making a negative sentence or a question, you don't need to use these verbs, only in the affirmative or positive. Okay, and I'm going to explain exactly how that looks in a moment. Okay, let's look at another example before. He lived in Fiji in 1976. It ends in ed, therefore is a regular verb. And the last example says, we read the first Harry Potter book last month. Because read and read are irregular verbs. They don't change the way that we write them, but they change the way that we pronounce them. So yes, irregular verbs can be a little bit tricky, but that's why there are a lot of lists on the internet that cover regular verbs and irregular verbs. So my suggestion to you is to find on the internet a list of regular verbs and a list of irregular verbs. And as you continue practicing your English, you're gonna see that you're gonna start to memorize most of the verbs, and then it's gonna be second nature to you. but at the beginning it's a little bit difficult. Now, as I said before, there are two types of verbs, the regular verbs and the irregular verbs. A regular verb is a verb that follows a predictable pattern when switching between tenses. In English, you can usually form the past tense of a regular verb by simply adding the suffix ed or d to the end of the verb, and we already talked about it. Examples are walk, walked, balance, balanced, decide, and decided. There is going to be another video in which I explain the difference between the pronunciation of these verbs. The other type of verb is the irregular verbs. And irregular verbs are verbs that do not follow the normal patterns for tense and past participle. So those are the ones that we need to really learn by memory. Run, the past tense is ran. Come, the past tense is came. Read, as you can see, is read. Same spelling in past tense, but we pronounce it read in past tense. And another example is drink and drank, right? Now, I told you that the good news were that you only need to really use the past tense of the verbs in affirmative form. So here is a little table that will let you know how to use the simple past tense, right? So this part will tell you what type of sentence are you making, and then you're going to see the parts of the sentence right here, and then your example, all right? So in the affirmative form, for example, you have the subject plus the past tense verb. I skipped. I skipped. This verb in present tense, it's actually skip. All right. And we add the P and E, the ED to that verb to make it past tense. But this is the only time that you need to really use the past tense. Another example could be she, ran a marathon, right? So that's the past tense of run. She ran a marathon, right? So, but you only have to use the past tense in the affirmative, remember. When you are making a negative sentence, then you don't have to use the verb in past tense. You need to use it in the present tense. But how do you know that is past tense? Because you will use did not. The auxiliary verb did already has the past tense in it, and then the word not to make it negative. So let's look at these examples. They did not or didn't, which is the contraction, go. Remember that I already said that the past tense of go is went, but make sure that you are not saying they didn't went, because that would be incorrect. No, you only use went when it's a positive statement, not a negative. So that's why instead of using went, I'm sorry, wait a second. That's why instead of using went, we say they didn't go, okay? Because the verb, look at here, the verb is in the present tense, not in the past tense when it's negative. Same thing happens when it's an interrogative or a question. Remember, in questions, we start with the auxiliary verb did. Did contains the past tense in it, so you don't have to use the verb in past tense. You use it in present tense again. So the correct way to make a question in the past tense is, did the subject do? What did the subject do, right? Did she arrive? Did she run? Did they go? Did I skip? All right, so instead of using the past tense, we're using the present tense in that verb, okay? And we also have the interrogative negative, in which we use first did not, then the subject, and then again the verb in present tense, because you only use the past tense in affirmative. So how do you make this type of question? Didn't you play? Didn't she run? Didn't they go? Didn't she arrive? It's just another way to make a question, okay? So now let's practice a little bit. The same way I did with the previous video on simple present, I am going to write an affirmative, a negative, and a question with the pronouns and the verbs that are shown here. And that way we're going to practice a little bit, okay? So in affirmative form, I will select the pronoun they. And I am selecting the pronoun, the verb talk. But because it is affirmative, I need to think about what is the past tense of talk. Well, talk is a regular verb. And because it is a regular verb, it ends with the suffix ed. So they talk for hours. Ellos hablaron por horas, right? But now I have to change that into the negative form. And how do I do that? Well, I use the same pronoun, but now I need to add something. It is negative. So I need to add the auxiliary verb that tells me that it's the past tense and the word not, which is that auxiliary verb did not. But now I am not using the past tense of talk, I'm using the present tense. And now I have a negative form. They did not talk for hours. And that might look a little bit off to you because you speak Spanish. And usually every sentence of us will have the past tense. It doesn't matter if it's a negative or a positive statement. But remember that English grammar is different, okay? Now the question. We need to start with a auxiliary verb. Therefore, because it's past tense, we need to start with did, same pronoun, they, and now the verb, talk for hours. And now we have our question, right? Okay. Let's do another one. Sorry. All right. So now I am going to select the pronoun she. And now I want to use the verb come. But because it's affirmative again, I need to use the past tense. The past tense of come is came. She came in late. O sea, ella vino tarde. I am using the past tense, and this is an irregular verb. But now I have to change it into the negative. But we already know that if the sentence is negative, what do we need? auxiliary verb plus not. So she did not, present tense, come in late. That would be the negative form of that sentence. And now I want to change it to a question. And question starts with auxiliary verb. Did she come in late? And now we have our question, right? Very important that you remember that only in affirmative you use the past tense. Negative and question, the auxiliary verb did, but the verb in present tense. That's very important. Now let's go to our quiz and our practice. Identify the sentences if the sentences are correct or incorrect. All right? And now we have them here. Obviously, we're going to correct them as well. All right? So when you're answering these questions, other than just say it is incorrect or correct, try to write the correct way. When I am discussing these, I am going to correct the sentences when they are wrong, okay? The first exercise says, did Kevin ran a marathon? Second one says, I do not came here alone. Third one, she did not tell me the truth. The fourth one says, they rushed home after the movie. And number 5 says, why did he hide from me yesterday? So try these and join me in our next video.